Okay, so this is the bit that I wanted to look at. This is the inlet side of the engine. So normally on a two-stroke engine, most of the ones that I see anyway, they've got either piston ported or they've got reed valve crankcase induction. But that basically means that the charge is going to come in through this side, through effectively the back of the piston, and the piston goes up and the charge goes in underneath the piston, so in this section into the crankcase area where the crank lives, and then as the piston comes down, then it forces it up. Well, this works differently. The carburettor is going to be mounted off the back of here, effectively, and the induction happens through this cavity here and this hole, and it still comes into the crankcase, but you can see we've got like a little bleed there, so it can bleed in and out of the crankcase through the crank bearing here, and the crank is sealed, so the crank seal is on this plate which fits over here, and inside that is this. What is this? This is the rotary valve. So the rotary valve, there's a little keyway which, so the rotary valve fits here, and it opens and closes that valve as the engine turns over. So your piston goes up, 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 up. The valve opens, the piston starts coming down, and the valve closes. So your charge is now in the crankcase, and actually some of it has been forced up the barrel. I don't have the barrel here for this engine. The guy who owns it has got that. It's forced up through the transfer ports as normal into the top, and then again when the piston goes up, then the charge can be ignited, and then we get the magic. So a very, very, very different process due to this valve. Now these valves, the rotary valves, they're supposed to be like super, super good for producing power. They're the go-to for like go-karters and stuff like that. So they are a very, very, very good system. So the one thing to note here is with this valve on the crank, there's two holes. There's one there and one there. So this little key here can go in either one of those valves, one of those recesses. This one you can see has had the key has come out at some point. There's nothing holding that key in other than the rotary valve itself. So if this assembly comes apart, then that key can come out, and obviously it's going to cause a lot of damage. So basically, we know, don't we, that we want the valve to be open when the piston's at the top. So if we try to set this up the other way, like this, and that's going to be wrong. Well, in fact, it doesn't actually go in. So I don't know why there's two recesses in there. But definitely this one with the damage. So we'll put our, so you can see, yeah, like I said, there is no seal on there. The seal is on the plate. Rotary valve goes in, so the charge stays in behind that, behind the rotary valve in the crankcase. Some of it will bleed out because it's metal on metal. There's no sealing surface as such. And then this fits over the top. So I've got a new crankcase, I've got a new crank seal there for this. I've got a new O-ring because obviously these things are critical. The other thing to talk about is that normally on these engines there will be an oil induction. So there would be an oil pump, and the oil would feed through this hole here, and it would feed in through this little recess, which is there. And the actual assembly I'm not entirely sure of, but that is what these things are. But they're all blocked up because we're not on oil induction anymore. We're on premix, which pros and cons to both. But whoever's had this engine before has switched it over to premix, and so we'll be carrying on with that. We're not putting the oil induction back in. So we'll go ahead and get this assembled. Lovely. So there's an O-ring that goes, should have shown you actually before I put it on, but on this plate here, which covers the rotary valve, there's an O-ring that goes around the edge. So this one here. So there's a brand new one of those on. It was full of sealant before, but the right thing to do is the O-ring. So there's also an O-ring that goes on the oil induction, which I've replaced as well. And then obviously brand new crank seal, and then I've just lubed that up with Vaseline, just so nothing caught and none of the lips were damaged or anything. It's a double lip seal that's gone in there, so again a bit more sealing, just to guarantee that whole crankcase area. So as I said yesterday, it's really important to make sure that the crankcase is sealed properly and there are no air leaks. Well, it's exactly the same with this, because this is effectively an extension of that crankcase. So here's the final part of the journey. So basically this is assembled crankcases and everything. We've got basically the air intake is here. So comes into the top of the crankcase, which is sealed off, and then passes through the clutch cover, and then into this area here. The carb's going to be mounted on here, and then this would have been the oil pump, which I'm going to blank off. There's already a plate that the previous owner had made to blank that off. I'm going to seal that with a bit of gasket sealant, and then, as we've discussed, into the rotary valve cavity and into the crankcase, and happy days, the magic happens.